On the 14th of May, 2023, an angler named Michael Worley pulled a fish out of a 50-foot channel on the lower Susquehanna. He kept it alive in an aerated tote and drove it to a certified scale in Columbia. A Pennsylvania Waterways conservation officer watched it weigh in at 66 pounds, 6 ounces. State record, 4th state record in 17 years, each one heavier than the last, and not one of them belongs in the water it came out of. Count the latter. 2006, a spillway in Berks County, 48 pounds 6 ounces. 2019, the Susquehanna, 50 pounds 7 ounces. 2020, the Schuylkill inside Philadelphia, 56 pounds 3 ounces. Then 2023, 66 pounds 6 ounces. 2 Atlantic rivers, 18 pounds of sealing added in 17 years by a flathead catfish out of the Mississippi Basin. So how did that fish get to the top of Pennsylvania's largest river? Follow the surveys. On the 4th of September, 2025, a paper landed that answered a question nobody had answered for this river. Where does the flathead sit in the food web? The authors came from Penn State, the United States Geological Survey, and the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Their method was stable isotope analysis. Nitrogen isotopes in muscle tissue show how high an animal feeds. Carbon isotopes show where it feeds. The team sampled 279 fish and 64 crayfish across the basin during 2022 and 2023. 79 flathead catfish, 45 smallmouth bass, 113 channel catfish, 42 minnows across 9 species. The flatheads came back holding the highest trophic position in the river, above smallmouth bass, above channel catfish. The researchers described them plainly as the river's apex predators. The top predator in the Susquehanna is a fish from the Mississippi. The ranking was not even the finding that mattered most. At the sites where flatheads were established, the native fish had shifted. Their isotopic niches widened and began overlapping each other. That is what a food web looks like when the residents change what they eat and where they hunt to stay clear of something new. One fish in a deep channel is an anomaly. A new ceiling on an entire food web is a population, and populations start somewhere specific. Flathead catfish are native to the Mississippi Basin and the Gulf drainages. They are also native to Pennsylvania, which is the part that gets misreported constantly. They belong on the west side of the Eastern Continental Divide, in the Ohio River drainage. The Fish and Boat Commission says so in its own rulemaking language. Native to the Ohio River Basin. Highly invasive outside it. The Susquehanna sits on the other side of that divide and drains the wrong way. The Atlantic side did not get them by accident everywhere. Fisheries managers in Virginia stocked flathead catfish into Chesapeake Bay tributaries in the 1960s and 70s, deliberately to build a sport fishery. The species has since turned up in Atlantic slope drainages from Florida to Pennsylvania. No agency ever stocked the Susquehanna. The first flathead collected anywhere in the Susquehanna Basin came out of Speedwell Forge Lake in Lancaster County in the early 1990s. The first one taken from the river itself was captured at Safe Harbor Dam in 2002. Over in the Delaware Basin, the first was pulled at Fairmount Dam on the Schuylkill in 1999. The published account of how they arrived gives 2 possibilities and no culprit: unauthorized angler introductions, or juvenile flatheads riding along inside contaminated game fish stockings. Pennsylvania has a permit form for moving a fish into new water. Neither of these arrivals has one. That is not a small oversight, because this animal does not need much help. Flathead catfish have colonized entire river systems from founding stockings of 11 to 50 individuals. The Commission's first move was to try to kill all of them. The notice told anglers what the fish was, warned what it could do to native species, and asked them to kill and report every flathead they caught. That directive was dropped years later, once it was clear the fish were established and reproducing. Today, The lower Susquehanna flathead is one of the most deliberately targeted fish in the Reach, with a guide industry attached to it. What replaced eradication was counting. In 2021, Jeff Smith and colleagues published a range analysis in the North American Journal of Fisheries Management. It drew on 244 riverine surveys across the Delaware and Susquehanna. Their model found flathead abundance dropped as distance from the original detection point increased. That is the signature of a single introduction spreading upstream under its own power, not a fish that was always there and simply went unnoticed. The same work tracked the Delaware side. Fishway and electrofishing surveys in the tidal Schuylkill have logged rising flathead numbers since 2004, when that monitoring began. Then the surveys moved north. Commission crews working the North Branch documented the first flatheads there in sampling that began in 2014. In 2021, baited hoop nets went in at Bloomsburg, Chickasha, West Falls, and Wysox for 40 net nights, close to 940 hours of soak time. They came up with 1,232 channel catfish and 72 flatheads, ranging 18 to 33 inches. Put those pins on a map, and it still reads like a river with a new catfish in it. What was inside the fish reads differently. The diet study came out in Transactions of the American Fisheries Society in 2024, the first population-level flathead diet work done anywhere in the mid-Atlantic. 576 flatheads were collected across 2020 and 2021 by electrofishing, baited hoop nets, and straight out of the Conowingo Dam fish lift. 241 of them had recoverable material in the gut. Half-digested tissue is close to unidentifiable by eye, so the team ran DNA barcoding on it at Penn State's genomics facility and matched the fragments to species. 47 prey species came back. 34 of those turned up in under 2% of the fish. That is the long tail of a pure opportunist. 3 prey items dominated. Rusty crayfish, found in nearly half of every flathead sampled. Shiners. And margined mad tom, a native catfish 2 to 3 inches long that the state lists as a species of conservation concern. Also on the list, walleye, rock bass, smallmouth bass, white perch, blueback herring, brown bullhead, long-nosed dace, goldfish, and flathead catfish. They eat each other. Then the line that reorganizes all of it. Under 24 inches, a flathead eats a mix of invertebrates and fish. Over 24 inches, it eats mostly fish. Channel catfish showed up more often in the smaller flatheads. Smallmouth bass showed up in the larger ones, which means the state record ladder is not a fishing story. Every pound added to that ceiling is a bigger animal feeding higher up. So what in this river is growing them to 50 inches? Flathead catfish want deep pools in hard-bottomed big rivers. The lower Susquehanna hands them exactly that, because the lower Susquehanna was built. Below Columbia, the river had cut a gorge through metamorphic rock that resists erosion, fast water in a narrow valley. Holtwood Dam closed across it in 1910. Conowingo went in at river, Mile 10 in 1928, 94 feet of concrete. Safe Harbor followed in 1931. 3 walls turned a bedrock gorge into 3 stacked pools of standing water. Holtwood deserves a number of its own. It runs about 2,930 feet across the riverbed, and when it was finished, it was the second longest dam in the United States. Behind it sit 2,400 acres of impounded river. Lake Clark, behind Safe Harbor, averages about 15 feet deep. Lake Aldred, behind Holtwood, runs 80 to 120 feet at its deepest. That is the deepest water on the lower river, and none of it existed before 1910. Worley's fish measured 50 inches long with 35 inches of girth. It came out of a 50-foot channel in Lake Aldred, directly below Safe Harbor Dam. Put 2002 and 2023 side by side. The first flathead ever documented in the Susquehanna River was captured at Safe Harbor Dam. 21 years later, the state record came out of the pool immediately downstream of it. same structure, same engineered deep water. And those dams were never built with a catfish in mind. They were built across the run of the fish that used to define this river. American shad once ran the Susquehanna in numbers that carried a commercial fishery. Holtwood closed across the river in 1910, 25 miles above the mouth. It drowned many of the best historic fishing islands. Its fish passage was primitive, and shad would not use it. By 1915, the Susquehanna shad catch was down to 33,000 pounds. By 1921, there was no harvest left to regulate. Everything after that is an attempt to undo it. In 1991, a $12 million fish lift opened at Conowingo, the largest of its kind in the country at the time. It works like a water-filled elevator. Fish gather in the tail race, the lift hoists them, and crews move them past the wall. For about a decade, it worked. In 2001, nearly 194,000 American shad rode that lift upstream. Best year in the program's history. Then the program changed shape. Once fishways went in at all 4 lower dams, the trap and transport operation was phased out. The fish were left to find the passages themselves. The numbers went the other way. 2015, 8,341. In 2016, the dam's owner signed a 50-year agreement with the federal government that included trucking up to 100,000 shad upstream again. The 2025 season ran from the 1st of April to the 8th of June. The sorting tank at the East Lift handled just over 1 million fish across 30 species. Gizzard shad accounted for nearly all of it. Channel catfish accounted for 3,611. American shad accounted for 2,051. The lift is still running. What it mostly does now is sort. Every fish that enters gets identified. American shad and river herring go into the truck and get released above Safe Harbor or York Haven Dam. Everything on the invasive list gets lifted out by hand. The Fish and Wildlife Service describes the modified operation in plain terms. The passages are run to keep northern snakehead and blue catfish from getting upstream at all, and to cut down the flathead catfish already established in the river. Maryland's Department of Natural Resources put numbers on the 2024 season, which ran March through June. More than 18,000 pounds of non-native fish were pulled at that one dam. 746 of them were flathead catfish. What comes out goes to research or to food banks. Figures the commission gave reporters for the 2021 season put 1,098 flatheads in that lift in a single spring. Some of the fish in the diet study came out of this same tank. The door built to stop them is also where researchers opened them up. The 2 lifts upstream, Holtwood and Safe Harbor, have not operated since May of 2020. So the lower river now has 1 working door and a person standing in it with a net. The removal counts are public documents. They look less like a fisheries report and more like a manifest at a border crossing. The reason anyone bothers is not written into the Susquehanna's own record yet. It is written into the James. Virginia, 2017, in the journal Marine and Coastal Fisheries. Joseph Schmidt and colleagues collected 2,495 catfish stomachs from the James River. They worked between March and May, the window when shad and river herring make their run. Nearly 70% held prey. That work also settled an argument about which catfish was doing what. Blue catfish came back omnivorous, eating more or less anything. Flatheads came back eating fish, and only fish. The blue catfish had the bigger reputation. The flathead had the narrower diet, and a narrow diet is the dangerous one when the thing it narrows to is a fish trying to migrate. Shad and herring appeared in about 4.5% of the blue catfish. In the flatheads, about 17%. And the flatheads were not taking them in proportion to what swam past. They were selecting American shad specifically, and the predation peaked in April, at the height of the run. One more detail in that paper matters more than the percentage. The heaviest predation clustered in the fast reach between Bosher Dam and the 14th Street Bridge in Richmond. That is precisely where migrating fish pile up against a barrier and wait. Nobody has ever established who put flatheads in the James either. The Susquehanna has 3 barriers and a sorting tank, which brings this back to the one stretch of the basin that was still clean. When the isotope team needed uninvaded water to compare against, they used sites on the West Branch. It is the largest tributary in the system, roughly 240 miles of river-draining central Pennsylvania. At the time of sampling, no flathead had ever been detected in it. That was the control. The Commission had been watching for exactly this. 4 survey years between 2018 and 2024, hoop nets in the same reach between Montoursville and Northumberland, checking for a fish that had not shown up. In the summer of 2024, the warm water unit set 12 baited tandem hoop nets at Watsontown, West Milton, and Lewisburg, 32 net nights in total. 351 channel catfish came up, 17 to 32 inches, a healthy native fishery by every measure the Commission uses. 6 flatheads came up with them, at Watsontown and Lewisburg, 18 to 21 inches, every one of them. The report is signed by Susquehanna River biologist Garrett Cretina and warm water unit leader Jeff Smith. That is the same Commission biologist whose name sits on the diet paper and the food web paper. It calls those collections the first presence of flathead catfish in the West Branch Susquehanna River in Commission surveys. And every one of those 6 fish is under the 24-inch line. Not one of them has flipped to a fish diet yet. That much is confirmed, and it is worth separating from what is not. Confirmed, flatheads hold the highest trophic position in the Susquehanna. 47 prey species, walleye and smallmouth bass among them. A range creeping upstream, measured survey by survey. A state record ceiling 18 pounds higher than it was in 2006. Removals at Conowingo counted in pounds. Not confirmed that flatheads are why the shad numbers fell. The Virginia team that documented the predation stated directly that shad and herring were already collapsing before the catfish arrived. They named habitat loss, offshore bycatch, migration barriers, and other predators alongside it. The Susquehanna diet authors flagged that their sampling missed the spring run entirely, and nobody has demonstrated a way to remove an established flathead population from a river this size. So how did a Mississippi fish reach the top of Pennsylvania's largest river? Not by outfighting anything native to it. It arrived in a bucket or a stocking truck. It landed in a reach already rebuilt into stacked slackwater 100 feet deep in places. Then it grew for 2 decades with nothing above it. The last item in the record is a policy document. In July of 2026, the Fish and Boat Commission approved new rules for the Ohio River Basin, effective January of 2027. A 4-fish daily limit on flatheads, only one of them over 35 inches, written to protect a trophy fishery. The same agency states that the same species must never be introduced to the Susquehanna, the Delaware, or Lake Erie. 1 fish, 2 rulebooks. Which one applies depends on which way the water runs. Worley said he expected his record to fall inside a year or 2. As of this recording, his name is still on the Commission's list. And 6 fish between 18 and 21 inches are already in the West Branch. Drop your state in the comments and the river closest to you. Subscribe because there is another file open on a watershed north of this one.